What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here for a very, very fun mock draft. You're not going to see anywhere else on the old YouTubes. It's a mock draft that we do every year. This late in the draft cycle, we're going to do this mock draft almost entirely based off of visits, the visit trackers that are out there, because logic would assume that at least like a top 20 pick, the team that's going to be drafting that player most certainly would have done homework on it. Would have brought him in, would have got a good vibe. You know, you ever see the movie Draft Day? You got to figure out if, like, people, his teammates showed up to their birthday parties and stuff like that. So that is what we're going to do with this mock draft. Now, it's not a perfect formula. There's some teams like the Rams and Jags that don't really value top 30 visits. There's a couple top 10 prospects, top 15 prospects that didn't have any scheduled visits, like Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland at tight end. So you had to kind of use a little bit of, like, Vegas odds, which I do use as a tiebreaker, as well as just, like, okay, clearly we'll just, you know, kind of plug and play this player there. But I was going to say, out of the 32 picks, I think about 27 of them, I'm kind of justifying that selection based off of pre-draft interest. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with it. It's not going to be a big, like, defend your pick type mock draft. It's going to be more so, let's just take a look and see what the information is available for us and what kind of fits, what kind of interesting fits we can make. And I guarantee you, there's going to be, I would say at least 60% of this mock draft is not a popular, typical, common draft selection if you're going on the current, you know, mock draft scene. So that makes it kind of fun, but I will be very, very shocked if, like, not two or three of these kind of surprising picks, kind of make you think about it type picks, don't actually happen on draft day. So without further ado, 1-1 with the Titans. This one's very easy. It's Cam Ward. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point. The draft's really going to start, it feels like right now, at pick number 2. And I'm going to have the Browns go Travis Hunter. How are they going to handle this? That's going to be the interesting thing. I think the word could be, don't misquote me, but they think he's a wide receiver first. And if that's the case, I think that's not going to make him happy. He wants to play, and he seems very adamant that he's going to play both positions. I think if he wants to play both positions, he has to be a corner first, wide receiver second, because it's not uncommon to have just a couple specialty plays for wide receivers in today's NFL. Usually it's like your deep threat guys, but how many teams have specialty plays just for DBs to occasionally come on the field? Like, sometimes you might get, like, a safety, like a linebacker safety hybrid that just is like a matchup for running backs and tight ends. Not really like outside corners, which is what Travis Hunter is. And if you look at if I'm his agent, I'm looking at wide receivers get paid more money. Play wide receiver. But I think if he is wide receiver first, I just don't see at an NFL level how he can play both sides of the ball. But that is a problem that I'm sure the Browns aren't going to get wrong based off track record. I like Jim Schwartz. Maybe he'll figure it out. Pick number 3, we have the New York Giants. This is really between two picks right now. And it shows, like, you know, Abdul Carter is the Vegas favorite. They've done their homework on him. What does that mean for, like, Kayvon Thibodeau? Because I assume Brian Burns is safe. So are they ready to give up on Thibodeau? Are they ready on just having Thibodeau be rotational guy until contract time and then decline the 5th-year option and let him hit free agency? You know, I've seen some Giant fans say NASCAR package, but, like, none of those guys are really built to do NASCAR package, to be all three on the field at the same time. It's interesting. It'd be an interesting fit, but I don't think too many people are going to criticize it. It's like, oh, the Giants, boo-hoo, they got the best edge rusher in the class, a blue-chip player in the class. It might come with some criticism, but for a team like the Giants, you just got to get maybe the best player available. However, they've done a lot of homework as of late on Shedeur Sanders. So for the sake of this mock draft, I'm going to have them select Shedeur Sanders. Now, that homework late could be to make sure they're making the right call by not wanting him at number 3. That homework could be maybe he's our guy. You know, we got Russell Wilson for a Band-Aid, and then you just have him usher in Shedeur Sanders whenever. And I think all things equal, if Shedeur Sanders ends up being a good starting quarterback, Abdul Carter ends up being a 15-sack-a-year play, you're probably, if you're the Giants, you're taking the quarterback. You take a good quarterback over a premier pass rusher when you are as starved at that position as the Giants are. So I'm going to kind of take the smokescreen, take the bait of all that late interest on Shedeur Sanders and have him go at 3. But even if you're going off Vegas, it is not overwhelming odds in favor of Abdul Carter over Shedeur Sanders. Abdul Carter is the favorite, but right behind him is Shedeur for that number 3 pick. At number 4, you're just running this up if you're a Patriot fan. Abdul Carter. Number 5, the Jags. They don't do top 30 visits, so we're also going to trust Vegas in this one and go Mason Graham, who is kind of feels like suffering a little bit of prospect fatigue. You know, as we go through this process, there's always guys that are almost locks to be top 5, top 10 picks. And then as we nitpick, as we get sick of them, as, mock drafts, people want to make content, so you got to kind of manufacture players falling and rising and all that different stuff. I kind of feel like maybe a little bit of that's coming around Mason Graham. Now, it is shocking that he was listed at 320. And when he did what he did on the field, and you say, that guy's 320, that makes it a lot more interesting than where now he's a little bit shorter arms and he's 305. But I still think for the Jags, that is a high floor player. Safe pick at number 5. Don't overthink it. Don't make it an Aiden Hutchinson situation again. I think that's a nice little fit. Number 6, the Vegas Raiders. I don't like this pick, but I love this pick for the running backs. I'm going to have them go Ashton Jeanty. I said in my last mock drafts for the Vegas Raiders, they are not a running back away. They are not a team that has the luxury of being able to draft a running back. This could likely be Saquon Barkley on the Giants all over again, where there's a generational running back on a team that is not a running back away, and we're going to have to wait for Genty's rookie contract to run it with the Raiders for him to hopefully hit free agency and go to a team that has the luxury and is a running back away. That's why we've been mocking, and I've personally been mocking him. I think a team like the Chicago Bears, they did a lot of TLC on the offensive line, have their quarterback in place, have their wide receivers in place. A running back would be awesome there. You look at Vegas, they need a wide receiver 1. They need you'd love reinforcements on the offensive line. They have an average offensive line. You have a tight end. That's, I kind of just look, you have tight end, you have Jacoby Myers as a role player, you have a fair offensive line. Does a running back necessarily move the needle there? But in the same regards, Jeanty is one of my favorite players in this class. I love the resurgence of the running back. I love his Players Tribune article where he's like, this is a league where it's all about tackling. How about draft the guy that can't be tackled? Badass. He's an absolute Terminator. Would love the resurgence of the running back from Saquon Barkley and those big free agents, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, to continue into the draft where we see a couple running backs go in the first round. However, are the Raiders a running back away is kind of my question. But on the other side, Saquon did some cool things with the Giants at the end of the day, and a blue chip player is a blue chip player. Number 7, here's kind of the first, they're really showing a lot of interest in that guy. I could see that happen for the Jets, and they're going to go Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Now, based off traits, in a year that maybe there's not a clear-cut quarterback 1, Shamar Stewart could go first. 6'6", 290, S-tier athlete, generational athlete, unteachable athletic traits. At a premier position like that, Travon Walker, ladies and gentlemen. That's how far you have to go back to see a situation like this, where Shamar Stewart just has no production, even though his hurries weren't too bad. But now you're looking at 7, and you're the Jets. You have Aaron Glenn, a defensive-minded head coach. If he thinks 6'6", 290, and I can get this guy. We're going to be able to get the most of this guy. We're going to have this guy hit his ceiling. Him and Quinton Williams could be pretty terrifying on a Jets defensive line. Carolina at pick number 8. This kind of seems like more of a popular consensus pick right now. I have them going Jaylen Walker, edge rusher out of Georgia. They've done their homework. Another player that's kind of positionless, which there's always a little bit of worry there that as a team, as a defensive staff, they got to make sure they get that right. They got to make sure they put him in the right position to make plays. But the Panthers have been looking for a Brian Burns replacement. That could very well be it. New Orleans at number 9. Another just real interesting situation. I'm going to have them go Mykel Williams, edge rusher from Georgia. Now, I think it's fair to say in Mykel Williams' case, he did tests at his pro day, which were solid numbers, but we've kind of come to expect freakish testing numbers from Georgia prospects. Didn't really get that out of Mykel Williams, but he still has a high ceiling. He's still in the conversation. If you group in all the edge rushers, probably excluding Abdul Carter, for the highest ceiling in this class, he's right up in there with your James Pierces, with your Shamar Stewarts, with your, if you're looking at it, Ezrakus, your Mike Greens, even Nick Scouton to a certain degree. These guys here are all ascending upside. You're drafting them where they end up getting drafted in the first round, banking on their upside. They're not necessarily complete projects right away. So that's very interesting that the Saints have shown a lot of interest there. But edge rusher as a top 10 pick, usually a fairly safe selection. Chicago Bears, number 10. This one I thought was kind of surprising. Will Campbell, lineman from LSU. I think personally, my opinion is he's a tackle until he's not, but there's been huge discussions about his lack of arm length and whether or not he needs to kick inside. But I was surprised to see Chicago do as much homework as they did. Maybe they don't like Braxton Jones as much as we thought. They're clearly not going to be giving up on Darnell Wright. They've invested heavily in the offensive line, which is very smart. But If they don't love Braxton Jones at that tackle spot and you bring in Will Campbell to be left tackle day one, are you going to complain that much? Because at the end of the day, protecting Caleb Williams and being able to establish the run game by controlling the line of scrimmage needs to be priority one in year one of the Ben Johnson era. Now, originally for the 49ers at 11, I had them go Walter Nolen, but they're one of the only few teams that have brought in Mike Green for a top 30 visit. And word on the street is there's a chance Mike Green falls out of the first round. First round tape all damn day, one of the most productive edge rushers in college football. But there's some off the fields. Some very concerning off the fields. And I feel like if any team is going to draft in the first round, you absolutely would have had to bring him in for a top 30 visit. The Niners are one of those teams, so I was like, that could be a very interesting fit. I don't think it'd be that much of a reach at 11 given his body work, but he is technically small school, going to Marshall, playing against small school competition, so maybe that might knock him a little bit when you look at his inflated numbers. But as a pass rusher premium position, the Niners need more help. They need more juice on that pass rush so it can't all fall on Nick Bosa's shoulders. And Mike Green could make sense there for the Niners as long as he passed all their questions and answers on that visit. Dallas at number 12. This is another kind of interesting one. It was the only listed official visit for Membu, the tackle from Missouri. Now, with this selection, Terrence Steele's kind of been one of those guys who got paid, and now it's one of the worst contracts in the NFL. Do they give up on him and put Membu at right tackle? Do you look at the left tackle spot and see like Tyler Smith goes to guard? Membu can be that long-term left tackle play. Maybe Tyler Guyton plays that right tackle. I mean, there's a lot of different combinations they could do, but I thought it was just very interesting that Membu's only official, at least from the two sites. I was using two sites, okay? Maybe third site would have another visit pop up there, but the only top 30 that I found for Membu on CBS Sports was the Dallas Cowboys, and he absolutely would be a value at pick 12, depending on how Dallas truly feels about their offensive line. They also had a lot of wide receiver visits, but I was like, you know what? We'll go Membu here just to see. Maybe that's interesting come draft day. Maybe not be surprised if Dallas goes tackle. Miami at number 13. I'm going to have them select another kind of interesting one, but also not really. Nick Amenwari. They need safety. Malachi Starks has been a very popular pick for the Miami Dolphins, but they brought in Amenwari for a visit and kind of thinking about Mike McDaniel, speed. He's like Chip Kelly, Oregon Ducks. He prioritizes speed, and if you want speed and athleticism, Nick Amenwari might be pound for pound the most athletic player in this year's draft class at a position in need for the Dolphins. That could be surprising. I don't think it would be jaw-dropping to have Amenwari get drafted ahead of a Malachi Starks if a team truly believes in the traits and their ability to develop said player. That could be an interesting fit for the Miami Dolphins. We have the Colts at number 14, and you're not going to just do it every time. I have the going Tyler Warren. Now, no top visits, but if Tyler Warren is there, and I think you can always make the argument, falls to pick 14, that is a home run pick for the Colts. Now, if we're just going off of visits, an interesting selection here for the Colts could be Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, but I just plug and play them Tyler Warren as he has no official visits, and I think that fit would make a lot of sense. Number 15, we have the Atlanta Falcons, team that they've kind of stood out as far as showing interest in the players. Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. Now, he did not test particularly well. I think it wasn't at Michigan's Pro Day, but he had like a workout or something like that. Didn't test the best, but if you're looking at tape, pretty damn good. Maybe better 2 years ago than it was last season. Injuries, whatever. I still think, don't overthink it. He's one of those prospect fatigue type guys. Tape, don't lie. Tape is a first-round player. Tape is the ceiling of a guy that can be an island corner. For the Atlanta Falcons, you need anything. Anything you can get on the defense that turns into a potential long-term starter, I think you could feel confident with that selection at 15, even though maybe edge rusher is a more popular selection. 16, we have the Arizona Cardinals. And another team there wasn't a whole lot of top 30 visits here, but I think he is a top 20 player in this class. I have them selecting Jahad Campbell. I would say in this, he's an edge rusher. Many people think he will be an edge rusher. He's kind of that weird hybrid. A comparison, I've used it a lot because I'm an Eagles fan. Zach Bond, who was, in my opinion, the best linebacker in the NFL last season. And likely, if he was named Fred Warner, if he was named Roquan Smith, he would have won Defensive Player of the Year. Now, that's just a little bit of bias thrown in there, but undeniable production, was almost matching what Luke Kuechly had back with the Panthers when he won Defensive Player of the Year. But I digress. Jahad Campbell's like a more athletic Zach Bond, And if you are the Arizona Cardinals, you have a defensive-minded head coach, Murph from Practical Jokers. He's going to go, that is going to be a utility piece. I'm going to be able to use this guy. He can cover. He can be an eraser on running backs and tight ends. I can use him to rush the passer. He can do it all. That would be a very interesting fit for the Arizona Cardinals. Cincinnati Bengals at number 17, and I'm going to have them select Walter Nolen, D lineman from Ole Miss. Now, this is kind of not a... I've seen it before, though. I've seen Bengals getting Walter Nolen. They've done a lot of interest. They've done a lot of homework. He's another one of those players that I think you have to do your homework on. You have to ensure that you know what's going on there, because former 5-star recruit has all the traits you'd want, but there's some off-field. No, not the same off-field. All off-field, when you bring that word, it's a buzzword, is not the same. You have some people that have legal issues. You have other players that have maturity concerns. I feel like it's much more that with Walter Nolen. But the Bengals have been doing their homework on him. Uncertainty about what's going to go on with Trey Hendrickson. So if they bring him back, Walter Nolen still makes sense, because that defense is... You have to go defense, I honestly think. Maybe lineman if there's like a BPA. They love Josh Sims or something like that. But with how they've structured their contracts offensively and paying the skill position players that they did, I think for the next couple of drafts, it needs to be first, second round, defense, defense, defense. And they better be hitting on these cheap, affordable rookie contracts that turn into starters. Number 18. I'm sorry in advance. But with the... now, it couldn't mean anything. We're just trying to connect the dots. That's all I'm saying. There was a player that got invited to the draft I think a lot of people were surprised on. There's been a team, maybe a little more than others, that has done homework on said player. I'm going to have the Seattle Seahawks get Jaylen Milroe. Now, with how they handle the quarterback situation, moving on from Geno, bringing in Darnold on like a 1 year. Was it? Is it a 1 year? Short term. I think it's a 1 year. Don't misquote me on that one. There's your, you have your stopgap quarterback if you're going to go Jaylen Milroe. If you go Jaylen Milroe, you're going to need a developmental plan. Maybe even 2 years of developmental plan. It's not the end of the world for these franchises to reset and do like the Aaron Rodgers approach. Do the Patrick Mahomes approach, where it's just like, let's, at minimum, 1 full season. You're redshirting. We're going to get you caught up to speed. And then year 2, you can look at challenging. And ideally, year 2, they challenge. Year 2, you don't have to outright get them. If Jaylen Milroe in this scenario, again, not defending the pick, not defending the prospect. My opinion's on the prospect. But if you're trying to look at it optimistically, with Jaylen Milroe, doesn't play year 1, red shirts. Year 2, I'd like to I'd have competition. Darnold back for another year. Him and Milroe go head-to-head. And it's not the end of the world if Jaylen Milroe doesn't beat out Darnold year 2. But then year 3, after 2 years of development, it's probably time to throw him to the Wolves and see what you got. See how you've trained that player after 2 seasons and got him up to speed and believed in the traits that caused you to draft him. Now you put it all together. Like, that could be a scenario, and I don't think it'd be a losing scenario for Seattle. But obviously, this is a visits pick mock draft. It's not necessarily what I think they should do. That's an interesting potential landing spot. Tampa Bay at number 19. I thought this was also kind of surprising, but they're getting old. Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. I can see Tampa looking at wide receiver. Mike Evans is not getting any younger. Chris Godwin's coming off brutal injury. Even if they're healthy, Matt Golden helps them out. Air it out. They're a team, even with Bucky Irvin, they're a pass-first team. And you have 3 weapons like that. That's just more that Baker Mayfield can do for that offense. I don't hate that scenario. I thought it was very interesting, the amount of homework that Tampa Bay was doing on the wide receivers in this year's class. And I think Golden, legitimate first-rounder, especially after that combine and breakout season with Texas. That would be very weird, but could happen. Denver at number 20, another wide receiver. We're going to have them select. And this one actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Luther Burden out of Mizzou. You need that gadget guy. You need that guy that can do multiple things for your offense, and that is what Luther Burden can do. He can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. He can line up in the backfield. He truly is, and it's been a lazy count the last couple of years. Oh, he's Deebo Samuel. Luther Burden is like the closest thing to Deebo Samuel that we've seen since Deebo Samuel. You know, I think that he could be a true utility piece for Sean Payton and that offense. And I'd like to see it happen. That'd be a pretty fun weapon for Bo Nix to utilize in that offense. Pittsburgh at number 21. It's another kind of interesting one, but a lot of momentum around this guy. Did he get invited? Trey Amos from Ole Miss. Again, is he going to go in the first round? Be very surprising. The more surprising, but kind of potentially realistic pick. We're going to side with that in this video. Trey Amos has got some first round buzz. You look at like Dane Brugler. You look at Daniel Jeremiah, like they have him like in the 30s. high 30s, like top 10 pick of the second round, but like top 10 pick of the second round going at 21. How many years do we talk about these draft prospects and we say that there's not a gigantic difference between players 20 to 45? And if that's kind of how you view it, there's no real reaches, I don't think, too much. There's obviously, you get your Cole Stranges and stuff like that. Sorry, Patriot fans. But for the most part, like Amos would not necessarily be a huge reach at 21. You look at the other corners that are on the board. Jahdae Barron is a polarizing prospect, especially if he ends up being a nickel only. Maxwell Hairston's like in the same ballpark as Amos. I think after his combine, and I believe he did get invited to the draft, so that's, kind of showing how the league feels the draft could go. But I don't think there's a gigantic discrepancy between Amos and these other top corners available, and Steelers always could use more corner help. 22, we have the Chargers. This is very similar to the Tyler Warren selection. I'm going to have them go Colson Loveland just because it seems and screams like it makes a whole lot of sense. They have showed interest in Mason Taylor. That would have been like my alternative selection here if I was just going off of pro day visits. But I think if they are showing interest in tight end, clearly Harbaugh would not need to bring in Loveland. He knows everything about him. That'd be a great fit. I know Justin Herbert would be very happy with that selection. 23, the Green Bay Packers. This is probably, out of all the picks we've done so far, the most dream selection. We have them going with T-Mac. McMillan here from Arizona, 6'5". Now, I'd be shocked if he falls to 23. Shocked. He should go top 12, I think, at minimum. But looking at the visits, looking at the teams that showed interest, finally Green Bay gets a wide receiver here. We'll just say that. They brought him for a top 30 visit. And this might have to be the perfect scenario for Green Bay to finally draft a wide receiver in the first round when there's just so much undeniable value at that 23 spot to finally grab a wide receiver. 24, we have the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm going to have them select Derek Harmon, D lineman from Oregon. Makes a lot of sense. That is a very realistic potential selection. That is the range that he's going, and that is a position of need for the Minnesota Vikings. Next up, we have the Houston Texans at 25, and we're going to have them select Donovan Jackson, lineman from Ohio State. They were one of the few teams that have a reported top 30 visit with the versatile lineman from Ohio State who is playing tackle and guard at a very high level for the national champions. And I feel like when you're the Houston Texans and you have a lot of positions that need to get figured out on the offensive line, a guy that can wear a lot of hats and might be a great tackle, might be a good guard, you get 2 opportunities, 2 swings at getting a starting lineman, and that might be too much for them to pass up on. Now at pick 26, the Rams, very publicly, don't really value top 30 visits. So I'm going to look at kind of like their big position needs at corner, in which Jahdae Barron's still on the board. Now it could be, you could just as easily put Maxwell Hairston here. But if I'm just looking at value, looking at the Vegas odds and where players are going, Barron could make a whole lot of sense there at 26 as a value selection. Rams need a lot of TLC in their secondary. Baltimore at number 27. This is a very Baltimore selection. Josh Simmons, tackle from Ohio State, a player who absolutely can be in the discussion for the top tackle in this year's class. Just injury concerns, falls to the Ravens. How many times does that happen? Where it's like really good player, maybe coming off an injury, falls to the Baltimore Ravens. This is that. This script has happened before, and it's worked very well for the Ravens. They've been drafting over the last decade as good as any team in the NFL. Detroit at number 28. Another kind of interesting, but okay. Maxwell Hairston, corner from Kentucky. I was surprised. Not a lot of interest, like James Pierce, Ezra Rocket, like edge rusher's a popular pick for Detroit. D lineman's a popular, like Kenneth Grant could make sense. Wide receiver, I've even seen a couple of wide receiver shows, but their top 30 visits were kind of weird. And it's not the only thing. I believe my Philadelphia Eagles top 30 visits have also looked kind of weird as an Eagles fan. When I see Hairston up there, you got invited to the draft. You could always use more corner help. Outside speed, get a lot faster in that secondary. That could be a landing spot, even though the value might not necessarily be there. But if the run on edge rushers, they don't like the character of Pierce. They maybe don't like, I don't know what you wouldn't like about Ezra Rocket. I'm a big fan. But, you could, go defense. You could always go more defense with Detroit. Add more depth. At minimum, more depth. More depth after the year the Detroit Lions just had is never a bad thing. For the Commanders, at number 29, we're going to have them another kind of surprising selection, but makes sense. I think even with Debo, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying this revival of Debo. I think they're getting a buy low on Debo Samuel, and they're viewing it optimistically like he will be solid, but I don't think they're thinking they're getting prime Debo Samuel. So then you can make the argument they need to look at wide receiver, and they've shown interest in Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, and I could see him potentially sneaking into the first round. Productive SEC wide receiver. I don't think there is a drastic difference. If you're looking for guys that can play on the outside, Ibuka is likely going to be a slot. So if you want guys, bubble first round outside players, it's going to be Trey Harris and Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. Those are going to be the two guys. I'd love to be as biased as a Canadian, say maybe Ayo Manor, but it's going to be between those two. Harris and Higgins, depending on the run-on wide receivers, could go in the first round. It wouldn't be shocking. Harris is a baller, an absolute stud, and if you're looking at this at the Commanders, they showed interest in him, brought him in for a visit, and thinks that he could be a go-to long-term wide receiver too. On the other side of Scary Terry, for Jaden Daniels, you make that pick, and you're happy with it. Buffalo at pick number 30. Another slightly surprising. I mean, you look at the sports, it's an interesting board. Kenneth Grant can make a lot of sense, but they, as opposed to Kenneth Grant, like that would be my pick if I was just doing it. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State is coming for a visit. Another guy that's bubble, fringe first rounder, ascending player, 200. He's a 320-pound D tackle that has some juice as a pass rusher, which is not always, like, kind of a similar profile to Kenneth Grant, honestly, where I think Williams is like 320. Kenneth Grant's 330, but both these guys for bigger players aren't just pure run maulers. They're guys that can get through the gaps, penetrate a little bit, and affect the pass game. But Buffalo, no visits with Kenneth Grant. That's the point of this video. So we're going to have them look at Tyleik Williams. Kansas City at 31. Now, this was very similar to, like, there's just too much value. They've done their homework on linemen. I'm going to have them go Kelvin Banks just because the value is there at 31. But if I was going just based off of visits, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota had a very good combine. He was brought in for a visit. That could be a potential scenario, especially if Banks goes there. Like, that's just another thing here, is not necessarily look at this mock draft versus who's available, but just look at it as a potential scenario where, like, depending on who the board is, if Ursary's there and all these other tackles are gone, they brought him into the visit. They showed interest. He could absolutely be in play for the Chiefs, depending on how the board falls at 31. But at this scenario, there's too much value, and I'd be very surprised if Kelvin Banks falls out of the first round. And then we finish up with the Philadelphia Eagles at 32. One thing I don't love about my Eagles is they've kind of, in a way, unless the board falls exactly like this, tipped their hand that they are looking at trading back. A lot of the visits that Philly has brought in are second, third round guys. But looking at the board, the two that I would love, Josh Connolly down here is one that it wouldn't be a shock if he went in the first round. Donovan Ejiraku's another. I'd be totally fine with him at 32. But the big one, the hot name, is Malachi Starks. Just recently brought him in late in the process for a visit. Much as it makes me feel kind of unpatriotic, because that selection would mean that Canadian Sidney Brown, who has all the makings of a fan favorite player, likely would get kind of screwed over out of his starting safety spot, and they just give it to Malachi Starks. I would not be upset one bit by getting Malachi Starks, who a year ago was kind of viewed as like a blue chip player in this year's class. Didn't have the greatest of year at Georgia, didn't test like a freak of nature athlete, but I kind of feel like Malachi Starks is in that same bubble as like McMillan. I think he's in that same bubble as Will Johnson. I think he's in that same bubble as, yeah, I mean, everyone else kind of tests pretty well, but just guys that, like, they don't need to be freak of nature athletes. Clearly, if you've watched them play football, like, oh, that guy's very good. I don't care. He doesn't run a 4.3. He has the hips, which don't necessarily show up from a measurement standpoint. He has the IQ, which doesn't only show up on a 40-yard dash or a vertical jump. And he has instincts, which are undeniable, unteachable traits. So there you go, fellas. This is a full 2025 NFL mock draft, kind of just based off of the visits, a little bit of influence on Vegas odds, and a couple teams that just don't value the visit process. I just kind of went with obvious selections there. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Because literally there's no like, oh, you're wrong about that pick. And literally I'm going off of the information that is available and with the potential pairing. So I'd love to hear what you think about your team's interest in said players. Do you think any of these, or maybe even some of the surprising ones, could potentially happen? Do you think Shamar Stewart could end up on the Jets? Do you think Mike Green could end up on the Niners? Membu on the Dallas Cowboys? Eamon Wari on the Dolphins? I think Jaylen Milroe, could he end up a Seattle Seahawk when all is said and done? Could the Bucs truly go wide receiver in this year's class? Amos to the Steelers could be surprising. Is there any way T-Mac falls all the way to 23? A lot of interesting points. Love to hear what you guys think. But that'll do it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As always, your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Check out my second channel where I have a lot of draft content in specific to the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm working on right now. I'm breaking down every single position that I think the Eagles should be interested in. I dropped the tight end video. I'm very close to dropping my Stoutland U, who's going to be joining that, tackles and guards for the Philadelphia Eagles. So all that stuff is on that secondary channel. That is in the video description below. And until next time, it's your boy C4 saying peace out. Love ya. Have a good one.